Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here. And thanks to the Plant Society for being open to taking a look at this critter. I'm Philip Hughes. I work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the headquarters office in endangered species. I had been with the Lincoln National Forest in the Southwest region for 10 years. And as of 18, I came into this, intersected with the problem with the Sacramento Mountains checkerspot butterfly. And yeah, so I hope I can get through this. I think my eyes were bigger than my mouth on trying to cram everything in, including this overview, but we'll see. But I'm not representing the service tonight. Sometimes it's good to segregate things when it's legit. So, but the Latin name is Ephedrus anicia cloudcroftii. I'm going to get my get some notes up too. It's in the Nymphalidae. It's viewed as one of the good number of Pleistocene relics in these kind of, not, it's, the Sacramento Mountains, which I'll show the geography, but they're not a sky island per se, but they are a sky island in the general sense. And these are considered to have, in cooler period, they would have been connected with a larger population area, perhaps. They were left there in the Sacramento Mountains and speciated or subspeciated, right? Nymphalids as a group have like mourning cloaks, fritillaries, the viceroy, monarch, painted lady, commas, and many of them have are part, in a worldwide sense, are part of a mimicry ring where there's the Müllerian mimics that are honest mimics. They have sequestered poisons into their tissue, and animals learn not to eat those. And then there's the ride-alongs that use energy to metabolize the colors for themselves, but are faking it as far as being poisonous like the others. Right? So, I mean, a well-known example is monarch, and it's got the striking orange, white, and black, like our checker spot that we're talking about in a general sense. And the monarch, of course, sequesters chemicals from its plant hosts. These cuties are quite small, as you can see. They largely, the adults nectar on Helenium hoopsii, the sneezeweed, which is a widespread plant in our area. Although there is a sneezeweed that's endangered in the United States, but this is the common orange sneezeweed. I was going to show some imagery of the checker spot feeding, nectaring on the sneezeweed. Just a variety of cases. I'll let that run through again. I think I tried to kick it forward too quick. Okay. Getting a little sluggish there. So the life cycle of, by the way, I guess I haven't gotten to the geography, I promise. Just real quick for now. The Sacramento Mountains are, they're part of the Basin and Range General Province, but they're also often considered an extension of the Southern Rockies. You have, those up here, and then over there, the Front Range and the Sangre de Cristos, and down through the Albuquerque area, and then down to the Sacramento Mountains, which is a complex with the White Mountains and the Capitan Mountains. And then the Guadalupe Mountains run down to the Texas border. And below. But the life cycle, the adults emerge about late June or July, typically. They lay eggs on their host plant, which is Penstemon neomexicanus, the New Mexico Penstemon. That's about 2 weeks. Those guys hatch. They go on to form a communal tent, which is a sibling group inside there. That can be easily 100 in number in a healthy environment, in a healthy female mother butterfly that has good nutrition and moisture and all that. Often a lot less in recent years. This one, for example, was little less than 30. But these are called pre-diapause larvae, and individuals will take a strand of the silk and head out and forage, and then they'll come back to the safety of that tent. So it's a really neat thing. Relatives around the world have a similar situation, but it's always a variation on that theme. The pre-diapause, so those larvae I was just showing that were in the tent, they go on. About October, the tent is dissolved, and these guys just scatter only on the order of just a very small area, a few feet or a couple meters is what's considered the distance they might go. They drop into the soil a little bit or litter, and then they go into diapause, which is a suspension of their metabolism, and they stop developing and overwinter under the snow, right, in a subnivean environment. The geographic setting, I thought it'd be nice to use a plant hardiness zone map, but Alamogordo is here. These are the Sacramento Mountains. The Guadalupes run down like there, and then you can see Santa Fe, and then colder hardiness zones are showing up north, as you all well know. As Lynn pointed out, not so much this year, but yeah. There's a Nokomis silver spot, which is a fertile area. It's in this same group family. that is in this general area. The Mount Sniffles is a close population. This is that subspecies, which is federally listed. And it was not long ago, a year. I might be off but on timing, but or on the period, but really only a year or something like that. It had been cleaved out from a broader Nokomis fritillary species, and is overall they view this as, like the expert on this views it as comprised of 5 subspecies. That one, which is right in our backyard area, is federally listed. It feeds on violets, bog violet. Bog violet. Another thing I wanted to mention here is, well, there was a population down there, if you see on the lower right of the Sacramento mountains. It's a iffy, a lot of taxonomic and information uncertainties, but they thought that that would have been included in this group of this listed one if it was still existing down there. If I have that straight, I believe and I think they believe it does not persist down there. But converse, or kind of doing a reverse on that, from the Sacramento mountains up there where you can see Sangre de Cristo mountains, there in the Front Range, there's subspecies of the broader checkerspot butterfly species that one very knowledgeable big butterfly guy in the past had thought was actually the same as the Sacramento mountain checkerspot. In other words, the one we know in a very, very spectacularly limited range in the Sacramento mountains. And just to add a little more to that kind of diversity with the little challenges of taxonomy, this is a rather common fritillary in the Sacramento mountains, and it is considered by many now to be the Capitan Mountains fritillary, which is would be another endemic, in other words, restricted range species. But it's near the Atlantis fritillary, so it's not resolved, but it's gorgeous. Whatever it is, whatever the name, it's fabulous, and it's right in the same meadows with the checkerspot in question. So that the environment, hanging up a little. There, if I can force it kind of if I double click it. Anyway, thank you, Jenny. The idea of these images here are to give you something to contemplate regarding what our meadows look like there in the Sacramentos. Just to give the visual on it. In this one, you'll note gopher disturbance here in the foreground. So this is a typical meadow that had been inhabited by the checkerspot. And this is under good moist conditions. in an area later fenced. But even with that, you'll note, to the extent how well you can see it, it's rather homogeneous, largely Kentucky bluegrass, prostrated Kentucky bluegrass. That's not a great thing. You'll see some sneezeweed in the lower right. That is about the only sneezeweed in this kind of corridor that you're looking at. And remember, that's the adult food plant where they nectar. The meadows have quite a bit of plants. This is verbena, McDougall's, I think, if I'm pronouncing it right, but spike verbena, and the sneezeweed behind it. And those all have different phytochemicals that are anti-herbivory. They trying to block being eaten by the hoofed mammals and all kinds of different herbivores. But the mammals, have specific reactions to the different chemicals in these different plants. But there's a pretty good predominance of that, as opposed to plants that aren't like classic non-palatable species. The general idea of this is you'll see a lot of it reflecting things I've hit on, aspects I've hit on, but also including the dryness aspect. We have, other than the bluegrass, we don't have a huge like thistle issue, but I'm going to show you a series of different butterflies foraging on largely bull thistle. That's the Capitan Mountains fritillary in the moving. And we don't have a big problem with that there. And it actually, given the limited amount of, and sometimes diversity of wildflowers, it's a good fuel stop for a lot of the butterflies. Because it's not out of hand at all. It's just clusters here and there. So speaking of meadow diversity, these montane meadows there and everywhere, and there's a major thing I've learned, are vulnerable, very vulnerable. And I was doing an analysis for the forest plan revision for the ecological and subjects and all that, and analyzed all species of conservation concern, the state, federally listed everything. Started with like 1,400 species and looked at all this. The highest number of endangered and at-risk species were in ponderosa pine, which is a pretty rich community with the ground layer and everything, that if it's not shaded out. But a way disproportional amount of them were in meadows as far as acreage, right? I'll do a graph for you. Meadow endangered species per acre, everything else. Yeah. Hawk moth on this. Oh, this is Sacramento mountain thistle. This is a native thistle. It's federally listed as well. And here, hawk moth is feeding. They love it. But it's a really neat plant. It's like a Dr. Seuss with the purple stems. and drooping. If you're inside it, it's up to here, you know, very tall. If you're inside a thicket, a semi-thick thicket of it, it's really something, and you're kind of in Zeus land. So, but that's something that's in the wet meadows, okay? And I just wanted to throw in some wet meadows. This is in an exposure that we did to exclude elk and cattle on behalf of the New Mexico meadow jumping mouse population that was there in the Sacramento mountains. But in the meadows and subject here, the gopher is what's important. Not only that, it's a true keystone species, ecosystem engineer. Through its bioturbation, it brings up lower levels of soil with some organic stuff, mixes that with, with mineral stuff, mixes that with higher, the top horizon with organic materials. And so it churns the whole place. This, I couldn't help myself. I asked AI to do this. I wanted to see what it looked like. I've never done it before. It's the only slide. Don't Rotten Tomato me on this. So, you know, the whole talk could have been about the gopher. The gopher was recognized by folks, you know, being in the meadow. But even to this date, like I didn't have the bandwidth and wherewithal to start research on the dynamics of the gopher itself with all these complex things. So it's still that way. It has been studied, some gopher systems or gopher penstemon systems in other parts of the country. There are a few, and some of them are older. But the thing about it is the gopher's facility, so penstemon is a kind of pioneers on a disturbed patch, right? As far as the seed sexual reproduction. The gophers provide for that. On the other hand, gophers they can stomach the penstemon's roots and what have you, even though the penstemon has iridoid glycosides in it. That's what's sequestered by the butterfly to help it be non-palatable and avoided, scary and non-palatable. So it's a paradox, and it's a complex system in which the gopher both facilitates and does some kind of control or regulation, so to speak, of the penstemon itself. Speaking of which, finally, I'm here on penstemon. However, here on the left is penstemon neomexicanus, the New Mexico penstemon. The one on the right is stricta, penstemon stricta from Ohio City up the road here. So I thought it'd be nice to do a comparison. And there's a nice, you know, we're blessed to see this kind of thing so often here. The penstemon, like I said, is disturbance oriented. This is a cut bank, and you can't probably see it so well. A lot of the real small green blotches are little tiny penstemon rosettes. Okay, that soil is falling. It's not so easy for an elk to walk on. I mean, obviously, they can jump over it, jump over that and another 20 feet if they're running downhill or something like that. But, you know, it's easier to walk up the meadows. They're not necessarily walking on this. This is one place where a good number of penstemon persisted, but they didn't have flowers because the elk can just reach over and clip that flower that's bolted on a stalk, right? And so can horses. It's a perennial it's called short-lived. I don't know how short, though. I'm starting to think they go. I know. Sure, they go a few years. The thing about these is that's I found really unique is the way I don't know. Probably some of you know penstemons better than I do, but this one, does the clustery configurations, and that's because it has that central stems that arise from or stems that kind of around the ring from a central caudex, and there is a taproot. But the thing is, once these things start growing and the plant, if it's a vigorous plant and so on, they start kind of separating. There is a connection, but they can be severed. And that's why, like, penstemon growers can do that. They can sever pieces and grow those, because there are roots that are on this little bridge, but it's not a stolon or anything like that. It's not a creeping, walking, running type of vegetative propagation. And here's a good, a nice. These plants were protected, and that's why they're not like those tiny things you saw on that slope in the picture. The individuals are referred to as pseudo individuals, but they are part of this. They're a clone of a connected plant, right? And I had found that so the rosettes are each individual stem can have its own rosette, but well, I guess that's it on that one. There's a whole lot more I was going to say. I'm going to have to drop that. It's really interesting stuff. In many species, including this one, the leaves, the rosette leaves will be persistent through the winter. They're actually evergreen in a sense, and but that's not the case for smaller ones that have bolted and sent up flower stalk. Those, it's hard to tell, but they do wither. But then they have whatever's left. They had put that energy, the starches, if you will, back into the roots to come back at it the next spring. Here's a sequence of different butterflies, a lot of skippers, nectaring, feeding on New Mexico penstemon. And again, the hawk moth. And if you notice, it went from tube to tube, heading up the stalk, which was really neat. Regarding pollen, so I've had a botanist friend, like I threw butterflies in with bees, and I was like, no, not butterflies, the bees. So these are largely bee pollinated, a variety of, and also flies, but actually in general, it's consensus. There's little doubt that the butterflies also are able to pick up specks of pollen and convey those too. But their role is considered far secondary to bees and perhaps hummingbirds. But I'm not so sure how much of a role the hummingbird has with this penstemon. But the bees have the fuzzy bodies, or the legs where they do the carrying. They're anatomically suited to it. But those little skippers, there's something called head pollinating, or what. where the skippers, you know, their head is well inside that, and they're getting at it and stuff. So anyway, it's another interesting aspect. Another thing that I learned in studying these is that this is a grass called sleepy grass. And it grows, it's one thing that can grow, handle being in a general turf world of Kentucky bluegrass, and it grows really tall. I found that it's kind of a refugium for some penstemon, where they're kind of hiding in there. I've got other pictures where they're really ensconced inside and quite protected. A colleague even had them where a penstemon, a tent was coming off the penstemon and onto some of this sleepy grass. The sleepy grass is unpalatable. I don't know if it has silicates or whatever. I haven't looked into that yet, but it grows in patches, and it's interesting that how many places I've seen refuge penstemon inside that. So we've got spatial elements that I deal with are the meadows. I divided those into segments and call those patches, which are for sampling, surveying. There was legacy plots that were done. And here, the purple rectangles are where adults were counted, and this ball was where larvae were counted very fastidiously, if that's the right word, by people that preceded me, worked real hard, did a lot of this stuff in these reference plot locations that they had set up as of 2000. Then there's these cages and corrals that we brought in, which I'll tell about if I have time. And you're seeing the red there. And then finally, in 23, in 3 areas, we built some super cages. We fenced 27 plus acres in 3 different meadows, which were 4 and 4 and 3 hectares, respectively, the fencing. And on top of all that, what you're seeing in the yellow dots are where we sampled vegetation, little vegetation plots. The overall known range, didn't exceed this area. A few miles of Cloudcroft, which is the red ball, if you could see that. It's not a great, I didn't do great with the colors on this one. The meadows are shown in gold. Even there, like over to the right side with the cross-hatching, that's private land. Those, to our knowledge, didn't have butterflies, the Checkerspot, or by the time anyone looked in those, they didn't have them. So it's even smaller than the entire universe of yellow gold that you're seeing there. But those are, you know, sinuous, or they're meadow complexes, right? The vertical extent of this image is only 10 kilometers. That's 6.2 miles. Oh, oops. So I showed you all that as of the recent, by 2018, prior to 2018 and recent, in the last 25 years, we've known them from 10 areas, and those reference plots that the Forest Service folks had set up covered 10 areas all around the left side of the map. As of the last 7 years, they're only known from where I highlighted in the green in those 3 areas. Not a good thing. So this talks about surveys. I hit on that enough. the big, the big change for us in 2018 when I came to the Sacramento Ranger District and the biologist for that area, we immediately recognized that there was larval plots where we couldn't find a larvae or what have you. So we did some sampling that rectified to the level of rarity that we were at that point. And we did a lot of that where I showed we co-located floral and environmental or soil type, cover type sampling all over the place, as well as the butterfly surveys. The vegetation plots are 2 meter radius. It's 12.5 square meters squared, or 135 feet squared. This again, I think I've verbalized this and these aspects enough. So from that area, I've shown this again, we divided that up into these segments, which allowed for an observer to go in for 20 minutes and look. And we know that if they're flying and they're on the move, the detection probability is almost perfect in that case. But we'd use double observer sampling. Another person would come within 24 hours, usually the same day. The target was that same day or 24 hours, and do 20 minutes. And you could compare the counts. And with that, you can do statistical stuff that helps accurate occupancy measures and abundance measures as well. But anyway, we segmented that up, that whole sample universe, into a bunch of these patches, but we, considered explicitly the location of the prior transects, which are virtual. Those aren't like a fence or anything. And those are incorporated into this segment or not. But we extended it then to not just those 10 areas, but we've sampled over 90 patches around the metapopulation area. Metapopulation is a group of subpopulations with limited genetic, reproductive connection and limited dispersal to or from. In a healthy metapopulation, populations can blink on and off, but they're rescued by other adjacent populations. So the trajectory, as I said, was clearly bad. Let me cough this up. We got after it too late. Just put it that way and leave it for that for a general thing, because that's what it is. But we, to show part of what the problem is when a population is that low, butterflies, even in abundance, or especially in abundance, and other species, cyclical, think of cyclical animals, right? Voles and, or the 11-year cycle with the lynx and so on. Large amplitude fluctuations. Well, butterflies in general have, whether they're cyclical or not, they often will have large amplitude fluctuations. And here's an example of 2 years where they did, these are showing the adult counts in the 10 different areas. And you can see a great difference in abundance between areas and between years, right? So the probabilities of the characteristics of small numbers, that's not a good thing, right? And you have very low numbers, because you can have stochastic or chance events that take out the whole metapopulation or what have you, depending on if it's if there's synchronous effects on the populations, or if they're not synchronous. But in that small area, right, a hailstorm is synchronous to all, or most of it, or drought especially is drought on top of the Sacramento mountains is covering all of them, and then some. Here's another example. Here's a year where 2019 and 10, they did 3 different surveys through the season, and 2010 had more than 2009, but you're also seeing that variation just amongst the different sampling areas. Later, we came along, since I've been there, after one of my buddies went up, Jack Williams went up to the regional office, we were doing these counts, the double observer, and the average of adults in all patches surveyed was just like 1.6, 0.00 something, and 0.04. There was a little higher numbers in the areas that had the 10 legacy sites and a couple other places that had historical presence, right? But also low in those areas. So putting some of that together, it doesn't extend to the present, but you can see the trend. The trend for pre-diapause larva was subsumed, at 0 at 21. And when I first put this data together, now this is restraining these data to the 10 places that they had been doing and that we continued doing, but in a different way. And this is presence and absence. How many sites? Back in 2000, it was all 10, and it went down. It went to 0. Of the surveys that encompass the 10 legacy sites, occupancy was detected at only 3 in 2019, and on basically 1 or 2 through the 22 season, and they haven't been subsequently detected in the wild. The threats that come to bear were recreational vehicles in the meadows, grazing by hoofed mammals. We've had climate change as a long-term, and then drought as a pulsed and pretty long-term, depending on your frame of reference. Perturbation to the system that they exist in. Woody encroachment and other things. Those are the big ones, though. To our knowledge, back in the 30 years ago, this is just a Google image or an aerial image of a meadow area, and you can see different people camping but back 30 years ago, they started with the bigger and bigger and bigger RVs, and they'd go right onto it. And that alone can add to that homogenizing and it'd be crushing of even sneezeweed. So even sneezeweed that aren't going to be consumed by an elk or whatever that's going to get sick by it, isn't going to be there. But this image is good because it shows that kind of turf grass. And the problem is we've had an ever-expanding population of feral horses over especially these last 30 years. But, that's, again, relative too. But their growth rate their reproductive growth rate is, they're quite fecund, if you will. And the elk have been growing for years. The state has been increasing the take a little bit. But the abundance is very high. And the way I would categorize it. This is drought.gov's drought analysis from 1895 to the present. Again, natural variation in weather and all that occurs. It's been going on for a long time, but these kind of things they would set back a healthy population perhaps, or part of it. If it was larger in area, larger in numbers, healthy. They made it through that. That was, I think I pointed at whatever, decades and decades ago. Here's excuse me. I'm sorry, this one was 2001. So this was a dangerous bottleneck, probably in both ways, in terms of demographics or population numbers and genetically. And then it was, we had great droughtiness again here and so on. But the long-term record, that's how the modern era operates, with ups and downs in those regards. But so what were we going to do when we realized the depth of the graveness of their situation? We opted to do one thing we could do on a shoebox or whatever tiny budget, few thousand here. Fish and Wildlife Service did kick in a few to get started, and subly that kind of thing. But we could buy some hog wire and head start some penstemon or what have you. Did what we could and have it dispersed around the 3 areas where they're still hanging in. Later, some plantings were done, but we learned through through watching that actually just corralling background penstemon, right, that's living as a refuge down low and not being cropped, or even if it throws something up, that gets cropped, but it just hangs low. A cluster of those, much better payoff to corral those, and then they become vigorous. They become vigorous plants. Here's an aerial imagery that shows one of our corrals, and if you can see it, right here is a smaller cage in one of the 3 meadows. A colleague from Albuquerque Biopark, we started demography plots on the penstemon. But again, this is just tying in the Kentucky bluegrass scene, the gopher, and only a little bit of sneezeweed, and you don't see other wildflowers too much. Then a colleague of mine and a close friend, Jack Williams, has a good eye for and the wherewithal to know, know, and go after some funding from the Washington office. And he saw an opportunity, and we wrote the justification and so on, and got those fences going as of May 24, less than 2 years ago. So meadow environment 2. This is a scene I showed that was similar from before, and here it is only 1 year later with, although a lot of it is there's a lot of western yarrow, which gophers actually can consume, but yet it does really well in troubled rangeland and meadows. But you can see 1 year, it's amazing, right? Also, we found, even in wet meadows, the protection brought up the water level a little bit itself without all the, you want to do beaver dam analog, whatever, but there's a little bit of effect just from the infiltration and what have you. The beavers allow, or the gophers allow for infiltration and all kinds of good things. Year one, here's a year one, big cluster of penstemon. The big thing was the increase in stature. So it was biomass. It wasn't numbers yet. I think we're getting numbers now. They're falling, the seeds are falling out. But there wasn't a change in numbers overnight. There couldn't be. Couldn't possibly be because there wasn't even many flowers and seeds for that to happen, even if, right? But the biomass exploded, so to speak, and in pretty short order. Some of it we had started, but the big fences, it was the big event, just reality. And here now, penstemon interspersed right next to the adult food plant, a good thing. The idea of a female nectaring, and not necessarily right next door, that doesn't happen perhaps, but nectaring, but then has to oviposit not far away, because these guys do not fly far. A kilometer would be a major marathon. Another thing that made them vulnerable. Here's a tiny penstemon rosette that I've babbled about probably way too much for you, but I've shown a lot of images. This is a good one that compares a before and after that we would get in that cage. And what else did the cage or the fencing bring? It brought back this great diversity of other plants are starting to come back. And here's a sequence of butterflies feeding on sneezeweed and some other plants, I think, in this set. Pine white, queen. How about black swallowtail? Anyone buy that? I'm not sure. I don't remember offhand. But that's it. Thank you. Lynn, I'm so sorry for the great over time.
No, this is great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I was concerned in the middle of this, towards the end, that I had put silver lining at the end of the title on this, but after having seen these fences and the floor that's coming back, there's maybe that idea of silver lining for this butterfly.
Oh, that's exactly
Okay,
that's exactly the metaphor that I passed to you. Yes.
Okay.
You are bang on, and note that hog wire or the wiring is silver, so so I'm technically good too on this, right?
Yeah. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yeah. Please.
Did you plant sneezeweed as well? I mean, for the food?
I'm going to repeat that question because I'm not sure your voice can hear. Did you plant sneezeweed as well?
Some has been planted. Yes.
It just with that one little plant of sneezeweed, it doesn't seem like there's enough food for the butterfly.
No, it's called nectar deficient. It's a nectar deficient, a deficiency in the system's quantity of nectar and the distribution of it, right? I've been pushing hard for sneezeweed to be planted.
That's kind of is not. I mean, is that part of it? It's not natural to go planting stuff.
No, the planting has been happening for years.
Okay.
A lot of it has been not spectacular outcomes, I would say. Um, the penstemon has come back spectacularly inside the fencing. It had some great patches where we were doing the caging. But yeah, it's a tough environment, right? Very hot, dry before the rains come on in May. It's very monsoonal. Arizona summer monsoon is strong system there. And then another big problem is the lesser snowpack. So that can heat up larvae that could come out of diapause.
Oh, yeah.
Bad news stuff. Yeah. On the other hand, I remember I said subnivean, like voles up in the Yukon territories, they're under there. It's not a temperature above the snow. It's closer to 32. And so they're under the snow. If you don't have the snow, then the extremes of cold also are a problem. Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm curious what the long range trajectory is. Are you expecting the ecosystem to stabilize at some point, or is that going to be permanently maintained?
Yeah, despite all my verbiage, I've still failed to do the gopher justice. So now the gopher, I mean, the gopher is tearing it up out there. And there's so much like heavy-handed management. There isn't one that fits and works so much. The gopher there's a trail that runs right down the middle. There was a trail, a social trail that ran right down the middle of one lengthy meadow segment. The gophers are even erasing that trail. They're crazy, allowing for the infiltration, percolation, all kinds of good stuff. Reducing sheet flow, it catches it, and so one question is, were the gophers constricted by like everything else? Was it like what I was showing you, the not so great conditions, right? Did that even constrain the gophers? I can tell you in the 3 fenced areas now, the gophers have had a head start too, right? But they are just covering a huge portion of it. And I'm all for them. They're doing what they're supposed to do. It's taking, as far as I'm concerned, it's taken over a lot of things that you might wring your hands about if you don't do an analytical, structured assessment of what you might do. The cages was a desperate act, but it was a consensus thing. What the heck can we do in that setting? So there's nothing wrong with that. You don't, question that retroactively. And there was some things learned from it. And I actually still track the cages. That's another subset. So you don't want to look at the databases or anything.
Any other questions? I want to make sure that our Zoom audience can raise their hands, or they can
Probably died.
or you can chat. And
I probably went to sleep.
Yeah. So if you do
It
have
was a
questions
nighttime.
out there, please put them in the chat.
Oh,
And we'll go
thank you. I
back.
hope so.
Do have some questions.
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I don't know if they're fruitful. Never mind. Anyway, I feel terrible that I told one person my pastor.
We have one person here, and they can't hear you, who said she's apologizing for killing gophers. No.
oh, yeah.
Long time ago.
Okay. It's all right.
Okay, so
If I was mad, I'd say that is not a question.
sneezeweed is to the checker spots, like Asclepias is to monarchs.
No, it's the penstemon. Penstemon, Asclepius, Checkerspot monarch. The Checkerspot gets its toxins from iridoid glycosides inside in the tissue of the Penstemon,
When it's the larva eating it.
the
they
larva.
get it from it.
They sequester it as a larva.
But the adult is getting the nectar from the.
Sneeze.
Yeah, I don't know about sequestering in that way. I don't know if that's the case. I have thought of that. Haven't gotten there yet. Yeah.
Does that make sense? So,
Does anybody know? Do they sequester through adult food? I should know this, I guess. I don't think I didn't. Right. Yeah, and that's another. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Another important point that I missed was that when pollen hitches a ride on a butterfly, it's not consumed. The bees, it can be a sink, but when it's other critters that aren't consuming, they get the nectar prize, but they also take the pollen, right? Butterflies. Yeah. Exactly.
And my other question, does our sneezeweed here have a species of checkered something or other, or a fritillary butterfly? We do. We have a specialized one. It's not in here.
The ones we have left here are up higher. Okay. Not in danger, but yeah, they like some. Lots of things.
Okay.
So would they be ovipositing on our strictus, which is similar to Mexican?
So these can use stricta. Do you know if whatever's here?
I do not know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we can all learn that. We'll go look. We'll all go look it up. Yeah. I haven't gotten there yet, but that's a good question.
Does our butterfly, if they're eating the sneezeweed, do they use the penstemon as
That's what
well?
I said, I don't know.
That's what you were just.
Yeah.
Sorry. But it's okay. Okay.
And they would, they very well may nectar on stricta to a degree, just like the fritillaries here and the adults, just nectaring, yeah. But the other thing is the very distinct host plant relationship with the larva, the caterpillars.
And by the way, we have stricta everywhere.
Which means don't take anything for granted, whether it's stricta or gophers.
there's a good wrap up. It looked like you had more questions too.
Just out of the conversations. We can answer it also. I'll go through homework.
Homework? Okay. All right. Sounds like we've all got some homework here. Anything else? And any questions in the chat here that I can see? No, that's it. Okay. Well, again, thank you, Philip. Very much.
Oh, thank
Those
you.
images-
Thank you.
With that, our Zoomers, you can stay on if you want to hear a little bit about what we're planning for the Gunnison Basin chapter, and if not, thanks for coming. And I know you can't see it's Jenny up there. Anyways, thank you for joining us via Zoom. And Philip, thanks for putting this together, and Jenny for doing
Yes.
it. Coming. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. No, I'm happy to.
Little bit of a break while
Yeah.
we turn that off, and then I have an idea, and then we'll probably wrap it up. What my big questions for Gunnison